Attention, duped masses!
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato.
Misleading labels, high hopes, and a nuclear supervolcano. Plus this day in history with JFK's joint moon mission and our song of the day by Josh Ritter on Your Morning Monarchy for September 20th, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Welcome back to listener-supported media, brought to you by you. Streaming live, MediaMonarchy.com/listen, essentially Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. But your Morning Monarchy launches each and every morning, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Glad you're here. We are brought to you by you, and a huge thanks to all our patrons, supporters, donors, cheerleaders, fans, friends, all of you. MediaMonarchy.com/support is the place to go to give us that support that we need. As we've been joking lately, we got the line from listener Mesophiliac, if you can give a little, I can give a Pilato. And I want to thank Mike G on Patreon. He did a little bit of a bump up. It's very easy within Patreon, because of course, times change, finances change. Sometimes you need to dial it back a little bit, but sometimes when you're able, you can dial it back up a little bit. So thanks to Mike G for the bump up within Patreon, and a huge thanks to our buddy Kevin S. Not only did he go to patreon.com/MediaMonarchy to sign up to give us that monthly support, but he said, man, it doesn't kick in until October 1st, so he went over to PayPal and threw me a couple of extra bucks. Huge thanks. Huge thanks. You guys are awesome, and a huge thanks to everybody that's already hanging out in the chat. Mr. Empty, Chef Jake, Nivik, all of you. Appreciate you. You can get the stories that we're going to talk about on the top of the tweets, just like you can get the invite to the chat where we're hanging out. Now, the awesome part is you can listen to the show within the chat. It's actually working a lot better than it did when we first launched it a couple of months ago. And really, we've only been our own stream for not even 6 months. We left Mixler back in May when they dropped the paywall. So we launched our own stream and essentially just turned it into 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. If you didn't know, and maybe if you're new to the Media Monarchy Kingdom, I'm essentially a radio guy. College radio at 95, commercial radio for a couple of years, independent, underground, pirate radio all around, and Media Monarchy for 12 years in a couple of days. And we're glad you're here. So huge thanks. Had my freelance gig last night. Do a little video gig once a month here in Portland, and no, Robbie Parker did not show up again. I don't know what his deal is, man. I'm waiting for him to make his grand reappearance, and then I can dump that freelance gig as we continue to grow Media Monarchy. Wednesday is food, health, and environment news. I coined the phrase Food World Order several years ago and immediately went home and bought the website that day. That website has lapsed. I'm sure some jerk is parked on foodworldorder.com. But I know I made it, and I know it's my hashtag, and I know that we are not only crowdfunded, but we are crowdsourced, and all the news is brought to you by you. Today's hashtag is Food World Order, so all those stories, again, you can find at the top of the tweets, just like you can find the invite to the chat, which is where you can listen and where you can get in and hang out. Let's glance at the breaking lamestream news. Puerto Rico suffers a direct hit with worries of floods, pounding Puerto Rico, killing 7 in Dominica. It's possibly even worse down in Mexico. And it's possible, I suppose, that LA quake we saw was maybe just the precursor. It's 200 dead and counting after a 7.1 quake in Mexico. And of course, as they say, the death toll will rise. California to sue Trump administration over border wall plan. Meanwhile, Trump blames Clintons for North Korea nuke crisis. Now, I got a little sanctuary city story for you. Just as our local peak Portland news. Oh, thanks. Swag let us know in the chat that if there's any catastrophic earthquakes, she'll let us know first. I've got a supervolcano at the end of this Food World Order episode and a sanctuary city for peak Portland here in just a second, but let's do our fact check. Has staffing at the UN doubled since 2000? That's from the BBC. Are long gas lines forming in North Korea, as Donald Trump says? PolitiFact, I think we already did that one yesterday. Hurricane Jose causes 30-foot waves at Jeanette's Pier. Better go to Snopes for that good stuff. Kendall Jenner did not warn Blake Griffin to stay away from family, despite report. Head over to Gossip Cop for that. In Europol and Brexit, will UK retain access to EU intelligence sharing? Well, if they continue to spy and lie, like all governments do. The biggest killer, of course, democide, death at the hands of the state. So let's dive into it, my friends. Again, this is a Wednesday, September 20th, 2017 edition of your Morning Monarchy. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com, coming to you, as always, from Peak, Portland, where Attorney General Jeff Sessions yesterday chided Portland and other sanctuary cities, saying they've become a traffickers, smugglers, gang members' best friend, and defended the Trump administration's threats to withhold federal grants from them. Cities believe they're above the law, Sessions said, urging them to reconsider their policies. Their refusal to alert immigration officials about the release of offenders who are in the country illegally leads to increases in crime, gang violence, and lawlessness. He said, quote, "Think about that. Police may be forced to release pedophiles, rapists, murderers, drug dealers, and arsonists back into the communities where they had no right to be in the first place. They should, according to law and common sense, be processed and deported." Now, this is Peak Portland, so even our Multnomah County Sheriff fired back on Twitter with a 9-part tweet storm. Well, I'll note his last tweet. "Forcing local law enforcement to act like immigration agents makes all of us less safe." Dude, you're a cop. You're a policy enforcement officer. Isn't it your business to get involved in food agents, fun agents, vice agents, construction agents? That's all you do, buddy. So we'll see how this continues to rage on in Peak Portland, as it's, of course, playing out in lots of other cities. Again, the irony we see, not only did it happen in California, but it immediately happened here in Oregon as well. You got, of course, Jerry Brown, whose aura smiles and never frowns. "Fuck you, Trump. We're not going to do all this stuff. Ooh, God, could we have some money for our failing dams?" And it's the same thing here in Portland. "Fuck you, we're not going to do that stuff. Ooh, actually, could we have some money for burning down forests? That'd be great. My roads!" All right, let's dive into the Food World Order stories again. It's all at hashtag Food World Order, and we'll begin today, like we began yesterday, with just another note about the bodega. Even Billboard is covering the story. That was yesterday's closing story about the startup coming from angel investors that, of course, used to work for Google and all your other favorite tech overlords. They've got a great new vending machine that could eliminate mom and pop bodegas all around the world. And it's really interesting. Again, even Billboard got into it. Perhaps unsurprising. I follow Billboard on the tweets. So there's a new vending machine that could eliminate bodegas, and people are not here for it. So says Billboard. I think the first thing I would note is that if you get your food advice from Billboard, as the kids say, you're doing it wrong. And pretty much all of the arguments against this kind of comes down to it's your duty as an American to buy your chemical corporate crap from immigrant bodegas and not corporate vending machines. It's never a question about what chemical crap you're eating, brought to you by the same food companies that pretty much are poison companies and are also pharmaceutical companies as well. My bodegas. Just pretty much put MUH before everything. How about a little bit of good news? Yeah, a bodega is basically a convenience store. And Portland is having all of these battles, so we talked about this a little bit. If you're ethnic enough to make a taco. If not, the hordes will come yell at you. Because, tolerance and all. All right, let's get a little bit of good news. Let's head to the land down under with like-minded Brisbane locals, creating small farms in their backyards and sharing their spoils in an attempt to live a more sustainable lifestyle. Brisbane Local Food, a website, began 5 years ago encouraging people to live more sustainably by eating locally produced food. The website also acted as a digital notice board to notify readers about garden visits. On these visits, advice on an array of topics including seeds, cheese making, and fermenting were shared, as well as food. Some pretty impressive, amazing photos of these backyard gardens. There's essentially 3-4 bathtubs that are acting as raised beds. And the piping work within the bathtub, of course, acts as your irrigation in your drain. Organizer Andy Cumberland said he was motivated to start living sustainably after a visit to a friend's place in Kilcoy, north of Brisbane. "We were eating cheese on crackers, and it was just some of the best cheese I'd ever had, and he made it himself. He was living in a shed at the time and didn't really have a kitchen," which brings us to our quote of the day. "I thought if he can make cheese in a shed, then I could make it in a kitchen." Mr. Cumberland lives in a self-sustainable, I think every time they use the word sustainable, you have to take a drink. And actually, speaking of, somebody tweeted that's the Media Monarchy drinking game. Anytime I say good googly moogly, that's the only one I can remember. There was a couple others. Maybe you'll know them when you hear them. Mr. Cumberland lives in a self-sustainable household in the suburb of McDowell. He's got chickens, raises fish, collects recycled rainwater, like a damn terrorist would, and grows as much as he can on his 40 square meter property. Our group is such a diverse mix of people, from old ladies in their 80s right down to young families. When we meet, we each bring along spare produce, jams, and drinks, and then we swap. I saw the sign again recently make the rounds. So it's just a big sign on the door, handwritten. It says, if we all grew one thing in our backyard, we wouldn't have to go to the grocery store anymore. How a website helped build a community of small backyard farms in Brisbane. That's decentralization. That's very simple. Nothing illegal, of course, unless they want to try and argue about whether you can't grow food in your yard. Aside from those kind of ridiculous battles, this is perfect. Perfect Good News Next Week. And I actually had this story tagged double as Food World Order and Good News Next Week. Good News Next Week is one of our other shows, Some of the Ways That We Are Winning, where we talk about good news, solutions-oriented stories. Yes, they do. Of course they exist. So there's a lot of evidence that pretty much everything you're told by, again, the institutions is wrong. Organized sports, organized religion, organized bank, organized government, all pretty much will lead you down the wrong way. An international nutrition study spanning more than a decade has turned up unexpected findings that researchers say should cause health experts to reconsider global dietary guidelines. This coming from Reason, and they called it the ongoing Prospective Urban Rural Epidemiology Project. PURE, Prospective Urban Rural Epidemiology Project, has found both saturated and unsaturated fat intake linked to better heart health, that a high-carb diet is a better predictor of health risks than fat consumption, and that the health benefits of fruit, vegetables, and legumes like beans and chickpeas may plateau at 3 to 4 servings per day. The new analysis presented at the European Society of Cardiology, they're meeting this week, or actually just a couple weeks ago, in Barcelona, Spain. It had 135,000 adult participants between the ages of 35 and 70 living in Africa, Europe, North America, South Asia, Southeast Asia, China, and the Middle East. These participants responded to food intake and lifestyle surveys between January 2003 and March 2013, with an average follow-through of 7.4 years. Researchers considered health outcomes for participants through March 31st, 2017, recording 5,796 deaths in total and 4,784 major cardiovascular events, such as strokes, heart attacks, and heart failure. Overall, carbohydrate intake in the highest versus lowest consumption groups was associated with 28% higher risk of death. Our findings do not support the current recommendation to limit total fat intake to less than 30% of energy and saturated fat intake to less than 10% of energy, so said Misleading, nutritionist from Canada's Population Health Research Institute at McMaster University. Dagan is the author of one of several papers on the latest PURE study findings. Dagan recommends a total fat intake of about 35% of energy in conjunction with lowering carbohydrate intake. Probably need to cut my carbs a little bit. I just feel like I like them and that they drive me on. I like lots of cereal, and I like lots of grains, and I like lots of pasta. Now, definitely when I quit smoking cigarettes back in 2012, I was a little skinny. My naturopath basically was like, start eating, eat a bunch, eat nut butters, eat nuts, eat avocados, eat butter, for Christ's sake. I wasn't actually on the body mass index chart, the BMI chart, your height and your weight and age and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't off the charts. I hadn't yet made it onto the charts. You're listening to The Morning Monarchy for Wednesday, Hump Day, Food World Order Day, September 20th, 2017. I'm Italian. We like our carbs. Let's head over to San Francisco, where they like their soda. A federal appeals court Tuesday ordered a preliminary injunction blocking a San Francisco law that required advertisements for sodas and other sugary drinks to carry a health warning label.
On Tuesday, a U.S. appeals court sided with the beverage industry as it granted a preliminary injunction to block a San Francisco ordinance mandating health warnings for soda. The three-judge panel ruled that the plaintiffs were likely to succeed with their claim that the ordinance was unjustified and violated commercial speech under the First Amendment. A lower court had previously denied the plaintiffs' motion for a preliminary injunction, something the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals said was wrong. They've since sent the motion back to the lower court.
A three-judge panel of the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco said the law burdened the sorry, I stumble even on the words, free speech rights of soda advertisers. The city law required the warning message to occupy 20% of the space on a label or advertisement. The appeals court agreed with the American Beverage Association's argument that a warning of that size would overwhelm any messages the companies wanted to present. Now, it's been a while, but I know that any cigarette pack in any other country besides America usually pretty much has giant, disgusting pictures of cancerous lungs on them. Probably over 20% of the space, easily. Two of the three judges on the panel also said the city's warnings was misleading because it didn't explain that soda is not the only source of sugar in Americans' diet, and that research indicates that overconsumption of sugar rather than moderate consumption is harmful. By focusing on a single product, the warning conveys the message that sugar-sweetened beverages are less healthy than other sources of added sugars and calories. The message is deceptive in light of the current state of research on this issue that the American Beverage Association told me to talk about. Now, that's what we talked about with the last story from Reason. Without a government warning, how are you supposed to know what to eat? How are you supposed to know what's good for you? I don't necessarily need warning labels on my foods. I just need labels on my food. That might tell me if we injected this with spider goat DNA. No biggie. Chow down. I actually asked Cassie this morning if she had ever heard of it. She was like, yeah, I think so. It's basically some kind of hipster coffee place. And if it's a hipster coffee place, well, then that means the people who want to buy up all the water in the world, they want to get into the coffee game too. Nestle targets high-end coffee by taking a majority stake in what's called Blue Bottle.
Yet another beloved Bay Area business is being taken over by a corporate giant. But KPIX5's John Ramos explains how the deal for Blue Bottle coffee could be different.
Blue Bottle coffee shops are so cool they don't even put their name on the front of the building. You have to know they're there. So there were bound to be concerns about today's announcement that the company has been sold to Nestle.
A friend of mine told me today that this might be the last time they're going to Blue Bottle if they see strawberry milk in there. So.
But fear not, says the Oakland-based company's founder and CEO, because even though the world's largest food company bought a controlling interest in Blue Bottle, it came with a unique agreement.
This will be the first time in Nestle's history where a company they've invested in actually remains a standalone entity. So it's not going to be integrated into the Nestle Corporation.
Current management will stay in place, and customers shouldn't see any difference. The company will maintain its founder's philosophy of treating coffee as a fresh food product. For example, they only purchase beans from countries during their peak growing seasons, and they wait a prescribed time after roasting before making coffee from them.
It's very hard to do. It's not efficient. It's not the smartest way to serve coffee, but it's the way we believe is most delicious.
The managers say the $100 million Nestle will invest in the next 2 years will give Blue Bottle financial stability so they can focus on making coffee. And they promise this deal will be no reason to keep coffee lovers up at night.
You're not going to see big Nestle signs up on the wall here.
There's going to be no Nesquik chocolate mocha sold at Blue Bottle Coffee.
No, we wouldn't do that because, then people might actually have a label and know what they're buying. No, we're going to trick them. We're not going to put up the Nestle sign. Stupid fucking gits. Now, this is why I love doing this work, and this is why I love hanging out with y'all. Because we know how to peer behind. We know how to break down the words. We know how to look at the symbols. Signs and symbols rule the world, as you may or may not know. The Blue Bottle fly is a common blowfly found in most areas around the world and is the type species for the genus Calliphora. The blue bottle fly, or Calliphora vomitoria. Its larva, used as fishing bait, is called a maggot, while its pupa, also widely used for bait, is also called a castor. Similar species include the green bottlefly, a close relative that can be distinguished by its light green, bright green metallic coloring. Blue bottlefly adults feed on nectar, while the larvae feed on the carcasses of dead animals. Adults are also pollinators to some flowers with some strong odor. That's the Twilight language of blue bottle. And again, you have no reason, no excuse to not know what Nestle owns and to not buy those things. Continuing our food, health, and environment news that we call #Food World Order, German Drugs and Pesticides Group, Bayer, said on Tuesday it was now likely to be early next year before it can complete its $66 billion deal to acquire Monsanto. A little later than previously expected, the European Commission has been scrutinizing the proposed takeover with a deadline of January 8th, but Bayer, the creators of Zyklon B, the gas used in the Holocaust, which did happen, said in a statement it had asked the regulator for an extension on the investigation to January 22nd, to which the EU Commission responded by saying it would take a decision shortly. Liam Condon, head of Bayer's Crop Science Division, said an anticipated closing of the deal in early 2018 is now more likely than the end of 2017. He also expressed his confidence that the EU would, of course, give the green light. However, the company said it could not think of any asset sales which could be made to allay the European Commission's concerns about what it sees as Bayer's looming dominance in digital farming. The Commission last month started an in-depth investigation of the takeover, saying it was worried about competition in various pesticide and seed markets. Among a slew of markets where competition was at risk, the EU Commission at the time named Monsanto's weed killer glyphosate, or Roundup, which competes with Bayer's glufosinate, vegetable and canola seeds, and licensing of cottonseed technology to peers. More broadly, it said the deal might slow the race to develop new products, and that the European Union would try to prevent Bayer from becoming too dominant in combined offerings of seeds and pesticides with the help of digital farming tools such as connected sensor software and precision machines. Bayer, which was making a media presentation on its crop science business on Tuesday, also said the division would face volatile global markets for the rest of the year, but would slowly return to growth from 2018, including its embattled Brazilian business. Bayer warned in June that poor sales at crop protection distributors in Brazil would full-year hit earnings. So just a little bit of delay. And I think that was, yes, one of your Media Monarchy drinking games when we talk about murders and executions, mergers and acquisitions. And they continue pretty much apace. We'll be right back.
We are the TV doctors of America, and we may not know much about medicine, but we know a lot about drama.
From scandalous romance
to ridiculous plot twists.
Son?
Dad. We also know you can avoid drama by getting an annual checkup.
So we're partnering with Cigna to remind you to go see a real doctor.
Go, know, and take control of your health.
It could save your life.
Doctor poses.
Dad.
Cigna, together, all the way.
I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV for giant, dirty paychecks from the medical industrial complex. Last year, Dr. Derek Shepard, a.k.a. McDreamy, on Grey's Anatomy, which anyone my age is like, no. He does the African anteater ritual on Can't Buy Me Love. So, Patrick Dempsey, along with several other TV doctors, teamed up with Cigna to encourage people to go for their annual checkups. Now, after seeing momentum in the last 12 months, Cigna is calling on more TV doctors to continue the campaign, and now they've got Doogie Howser and the black guy from Scrubs. You dirty, dirty whores. I hope you enjoy that filthy pharmaceutical money. Continuing our food, health, and environment news on your Morning Monarchy, it was like a dog's life, one Vietnamese woman said about her experience of living in the UK. She had been trafficked into the country and said she had no fixed job and no fixed accommodation. The woman, who was being interviewed as part of research exploring human trafficking in Vietnam, has now returned to Vietnam. But the distinction between trafficking and illegal migration is a complex and political one. And some people who the UK defines as victims of human trafficking don't see it that way. Another man interviewed, this by The Conversation, this article published on Business Insider. He had also returned to Vietnam after being smuggled to the UK to work at a cannabis plantation. Told me he had been very happy and would very much like to go back. A new report co-authored for the UK's Independent Anti-Slavery Commissioner details the types of routes Vietnamese people use to get to the UK and highlighted the shortcomings of British authorities in tracking and helping those trafficked into the country. Most of the victims of trafficking into the UK are part of a law-abiding diasporic community who have established successful niche businesses such as nail shops, Vietnamese supermarkets, and restaurants. Yet some parts of the Vietnamese community have excelled at the cultivation of cannabis, growing it on an industrial scale throughout the UK, and which form a significant part of the wider UK's billion-pound cannabis market. In the last 10 years, the wholesale cultivation and distribution of cannabis has proved to be so profitable to Vietnamese cannabis growers that the economic opportunities available in the UK have become a magnet for new illegal migrants keen to try their luck. In February 2017, police in Wiltshire in the west of England discovered a nuclear bunker that had been converted to house a vast cannabis plantation staffed by Vietnamese migrants. Now, this story goes on, and this, like I said, is a longer investigative report. It's over on antislaverycommissioner.co.uk, but the article on Business Insider, this is how migrants are being trafficked to grow marijuana in the UK. Now, of course, what an interesting idea. I just even saw this the other day. Of course, if you follow things like Anarchy Ball. Who's more against the state? The people that don't recognize borders, don't pay taxes? My taxes! My state! Let's continue looking around the world at food, health, and environment news. And again, I'm essentially laying out trails, laying out crumbs, laying out ideas. Laying out some high hopes. The builders of an award-winning home made from hemp hope that they inspire a shift towards making it a mainstream construction material. And again, this is all happening. It's all happening massively quickly. And the biggest unfortunate part about a lot of it, as I've said many times, is all the people who got to lord over the prohibition of cannabis now get to flip a switch and just roll around in all the dough from their exploitation of something. They're now only just barely letting us maybe ask for licenses. If it please the crown, can I grow a plant? And some of you have to go off for meetings with my boss. Balanced Earth recently won the Master Builders New South Wales Energy Efficient Building Award for a home in the Byron Bay hinterland in northern New South Wales. Architect Michael Leung said that while industrial hemp was popular in textiles, there was a growing interest in using the cannabis sativa plant in buildings. I think we've just hit the hemp industry at the right time, and in Byron Bay, there's a real consciousness and responsibility to the environment, so it just seamlessly flowed together. When you grow the hemp, it takes the carbon out of the atmosphere and it stores the carbon in that fiber. And you process it and lock the carbon up into the building, so at that point it becomes carbon negative. To have a building material that is carbon negative is almost revolutionary. To use hemp in construction, the builders take the chopped hurd, that is the inner woody core, mix it with lime and sand to create a substance they have dubbed hempcrete. Hempcrete. High hopes that hempcrete could revolutionize the Australian building industry. And we file that one jointly under Food World Order, but also Mary Jane reports. Now, if I recall from my science classes in school, I always remember being told carbon dioxide is a good thing. It's almost, what do they call it, like a driver of life on Earth as we know it. Now, recently, over the last several years, a lot of people have started to believe that carbon's a bad thing. So if you think that carbon's a dirty, evil thing, well, there's another great reason for you to use hempcrete. Carbon negative. Fancy yourself some Riesling and apple cinnamon pancakes for breakfast, or perhaps a Cab Sav brownie? We're moving from the weed to the wine right now. One business in the United States has embraced a drink your wine and eat it too kind of attitude, turning grape waste into wine flour. Hillary Niver Johnson makes wine flour in Finger Lakes, the largest wine producing region in New York State. Wine flour, Flour, is made from pomace, the skin of wine grapes after they're pressed for juice. POMACE. Ms. Niver Johnson said that more than 11,000 tons of pomace was produced in the Finger Lakes District. New York State is the third largest producer of pomace in the United States, behind, of course, California and Washington. Oh, we got some Finger Lakes love in the chat. Glad we got some folks over there. New York State, already said that. What we do is we supply them with bins as they are pressing the grapes. The seeds and the skins are separated using a traditional seed cleaner, which is also uncommon these days, as Americans aren't allowed to save their seeds if they're owned by a large corporation. Isn't it funny, these things we find out when we look at Australia? They're all saving their well water, saving their seeds. Good Lord. Somebody better invade that country. We use this equipment to clean our seeds from the skin so that we can save the seed for grape seed oil, and then all the skins are dried. We use solar dehydration to minimize our carbon footprint, which takes quite a while, especially if we harvest in October, but it also minimizes any heat chemicals that get into the product and keeps the nutritional components intact. Once they're dried, then they're ready to be milled, then we sift everything in bag and label, and they're ready to go out the door. Drink your wine and eat it too. American business tackles wine waste by turning it into flour. I would, for one, like to try some wine flour in my kitchen. Something I would not be as hyped about trying in my kitchen is that lab-made meat. But it's the future of meat and poultry, they'd like to tell you, or at least part of the future. That's what some investors, among them global agriculture heavyweight Cargill, are saying about meat grown in labs from cells taken from animals without slaughtering them. On August 22nd, Memphis Meats in the Bay Area of California. Of course, Memphis Meats in California. It's another classic truth in advertising with the misleading labels, which so far has produced beef, chicken, and duck directly from animal cells, announced it's raised $17 million in funding from investors. These investors include all the greats: Cargill, Bill Gates, Richard Branson. So much like the bodega, all you got to do is look at the list of angel investors and see who's on there, and you realize, nope. It plans to use the money to accelerate the scaling up of clean meat production and to reduce production costs to levels comparable to and ultimately below conventional meat costs. So you guys, the same big boys who have forced you into centralized, factory, terrible chemical food, they've got the new plan now. They're going to let you eat lab-grown meat. Meanwhile, they'll get to keep all the good meat for themselves. And, and occasionally when there's, maybe some kind of cop that rolls around in your place, he might find that you've got honey in your apartment. And he might steal it from you. Because that's the Soylent Green world we are all just running headlong into. Oh my God, I can't wait. Let me out of the way. Shut up and take my money. Please get me in the dystopia. There it is. Already writing it in the chat. Reminds me of Soylent Green when he steals the real meat. Exactly right. Exactly right. You might recall there's an episode of Corbett Report's Film, Literature, and the New World Order where yours truly talks about Make Room, Make Room. That's the book name that they turned into the film Soylent Green. The book, you might recall, has a little bit of an intro, by Paul Ehrlich of the population bomb. The guys that talk about putting drugs in the water. Oh, are they talking about putting lithium in the water in the UK this week? Huh. Stop the presses. You are listening to Your Morning Monarchy, and we've got the last few headlines using hashtag Food World Order, and as the last few headlines roll up, they get pretty gross. We, the undersigned, more than 180 scientists and doctors from 36 countries, recommend a moratorium on the rollout of the fifth generation, 5G, for telecommunication until potential hazards for human health and the environment have been fully investigated by scientists independent from industry. 5G will substantially increase exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic fields, RF EMF, on top of the 2G, 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi, etc. for the telecommunications already in place. RF EMF has been proven to be harmful for humans and the environment. 5G technology is effective only over a short distance. It's poorly transmitted through solid material. Many new antennas will be required, and full-scale implementation will result in antennas every 10 to 12 houses in urban areas, thus massively increasing mandatory exposure. With the ever more extensive use of wireless technologies, nobody can avoid exposure. Because on top of the increased number of 5G transmitters, even within housing, shops, and in hospitals, according to estimates, 10 to 20 billion connections to refrigerators, washing machines, surveillance cameras, self-driving cars, buses, etc. will all be parts of the Internet of Things. All together can cause a substantial increase in the total long-term RF EMF exposure to all EU citizens. Crazy conspiracy theorists. RF are harmless, they say in the chat. Scientists and doctors warn of potential serious health impacts of 5th generation 5G wireless technology. Now, this is a massive piece over on Global Research, which actually the page wasn't even loading for me earlier. It was getting an error message saying our traffic is too much. Full deployment of 5G combined with the amount of metallic nanoparticles in the atmosphere could possibly allow the control of the human central nervous system by nefarious types. Maybe that's why they're rolling it out so quickly. This is actually the full letter posted on globalresearch.ca, and so it has the hundreds of doctors all sign their names in the countries that they're from. So you can go down through these and you can go look and you can start searching them. And I did it a little bit last night. It's like, let's see if this is a real person. Yep, there she is. Looks like a hippie, but obviously real. Also, see in the chat, Russia and China have already deployed 5G satellites. This is a discussion we'll have to continue to have, as these last several stories are all somewhat speculative that require more investigation. On Thursday night, now, would that be last Thursday? No, that's, I believe, tomorrow. On Thursday night, over 600,000 acres of Houston will be sprayed with controversial chemicals with the potential to kill millions of bees and potentially harm the local population. Houston area health officials are working with the United States Air Force to conduct aerial spraying operation on Thursday night in an attempt to fight a possible influx of disease-carrying mosquitoes following flooding from Hurricane Harvey. However, residents fear the spraying of the chemical known as dibrom or nalid may cause unintended health consequences. The Air Force will be flying modified C-130 cargo planes out of Kelly Air Force Base in San Antonio in an operation which may take more than one day. Houston prepares to be sprayed by bee-killing chemicals, of course, to fight those mosquitoes. And we told you this would be the discussion that would come out not long after these hurricanes and floods and standing water. Now, our other story originally comes from a tweet. Is this where it's from? Okay, yeah. Susan Gerard, 9, on the tweets. She doesn't follow me, I don't follow her. She says, and no, this is not fake news. California Governor Jerry Brown to allow HIV-positive people to donate blood. We get this from Your Newswire, which is one of those sites that's kind of popped up in the last little bit, and you don't want to end your research there. California Governor Jerry Brown is expected to greenlight a bill allowing HIV-positive people to knowingly expose their blood to others. The bill, SB 239, will reduce the penalties for knowingly exposing someone to HIV without telling them, allowing HIV-positive people to donate their blood to others. Lawmakers claim the current felony charge for the crime is discriminatory. FoxNews.com reports. Okay, so then we get our first site. State Senator Scott Wiener, San Francisco Democrat who introduced the bill, said current law discriminates against people with HIV because people who expose others with different viruses get only a misdemeanor rather than a felony. Right now, HIV is singled out for uniquely harsh treatment as a felony, Wiener said during the floor debate, according to the Los Angeles Times. He added that modern drugs allow someone with HIV to be non-infectious to others, while the felony charge may discourage some from getting tested. So we click that link and we can open up FoxNews.com. California lawmakers gave a green light Monday to a bill that would reduce penalties for knowingly exposing someone to HIV without telling them, claiming the current felony charge for the crime is discriminatory. The bill, SB 239, will now head to Governor Jerry Brown for his signature or veto, the Los Angeles Times reported. Okay, we can click that link. Now we're 3 pages deep. This is fundamental importance. This goes back to the very beginning of all this stuff, Media Monarchy, do-it-yourself blogs, and all that shit. Click it back to the source. September 11th, reporting from Sacramento, Patrick McGreevy, writing for the Los Angeles Times, California lawmakers vote to reduce penalty for knowingly exposing sexual partners to HIV. State lawmakers on Monday gave final legislative approval to a bill that would reduce from a felony to a misdemeanor the crime of knowingly exposing a partner to HIV without disclosing the infection. SB 239, which now goes to the governor, was introduced by Senator Scott Wiener, Democrat from San Francisco, who said the current law discriminated against those who have human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV, the precursor to AIDS, because exposure to other communicable diseases is a misdemeanor. The same reduction in crime level would apply to people who donate blood or semen without disclosing that they have tested positive for HIV or AIDS. Right now, HIV is singled out for uniquely harsh treatment as a felony, Wiener told his colleagues during the floor debate. Republicans, including Senator Joel Anderson of San Diego, voted against the bill, saying it puts the public at risk. I'm of the mind that if you purposefully inflict another with a disease that alters their lifestyle the rest of their life, puts them on a regimen of medications to maintain any kind of normalcy, it should be a felony. It's absolutely crazy to me that we should go light on this. So that's your California politics. And we'll see what Governor Jerry Brown does. And again, his aura smiles and never frowns. Soon he will be president. Finally, my friends, as we start to wrap up your Food World Order edition of your Morning Monarchy, we like to transition into the next day of news coverage that we do. Each day of the week on your Morning Monarchy is a different subject. Monday's world news, Tuesday's technology, Wednesday's food, health, and environment news. That means Thursday is the dark day, the underbelly of culture. Dark, disturbing, occult nastiness. And some of your favorite days. That's hashtag Holy Hexes. So as we wrap up your Food World Order edition, we like to sort of set the stage for Holy Hexes, if you will. After North Korea's latest nuclear test, scientists are worried that more underground explosions in the isolated country's rocky north could set the stage for a deadly volcanic eruption, not unlike the one that NASA fears could be brewing in the Yellowstone caldera. Following North Korea's 6th nuclear test, Chinese authorities have stepped up radiation monitoring and even closed part of their border with North Korea as fallout fears have intensified. And now, as Newsweek reports, China has limited access to a nature reserve on its border with North Korea after a mysterious series of seismic shakes at the rogue nation's nuclear site were detected less than 10 minutes after it conducted its latest test, which also triggered a sizable tremor. The severity of the tremors prompted Beijing to close the site over fears that underground detonations by the North Koreans at a facility near Punggye-ri could lead to rock slides, or worse, trigger an eruption of the active supervolcano Mount Pektu.
North Korea's nuclear tests could trigger a supervolcano eruption, and volcanists are extremely concerned about it. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know here for you on IO. Welcome back to Inform Overload. I'm Charlotte Dobre. North Korea shocked the world this past weekend when they announced they had successfully tested a nuclear weapon underground. The country also promised to continue nuclear testing despite severe UN sanctions. North Korea consulted British researchers about a volcano named Mount Pektu, long thought to be dormant. The last time it erupted was in the year 946, and it was a doozy. It released 1,000 times more energy than the eruption at Mount St. Helens, and was one of the biggest eruptions ever recorded. The eruption hurled rocks and ash as far away as Japan, but the research revealed that the magma chamber within Mount Pektu is far from dead. In fact, it has the potential to destroy thousands of kilometers of area. There were a series of earthquakes in 2002 and 2005 that made it clear that there was still some volcanic activity going on beneath the surface. And guess what? North Korea's nuclear weapons program is speeding up the process because they chose an area right under Mount Pektu as one of the test sites. Not good. North Korea is testing weapons underground, and those tests are sending pressure waves through the volcano's magma chamber. If the mountain collapses because of a test, that would expose the hole at the top, and that will let out whatever is bottling up inside Mount Paektu. So how likely is it that this could happen? The most recent nuclear weapons tests were 5 and 5.6 on the moment magnitude scale. That probably means they were testing basic atomic weapons. But if North Korea decides to test its hydrogen bomb they're so excited about, it would create a 7.0 magnitude earthquake, which could trigger an eruption. If that happens, thousands of North Korean people will die, and the already barren agriculture industry in the nation will collapse, causing a severe famine and a humanitarian disaster. Wouldn't it be ironic if North Korea's continued nuclear tests result in them blowing themselves up?
So they just need to set off the volcano and then blame it on North Korea nuclear testing. There's another idea for the criminals in action at the CIA. According to Disclosed TV, the magma and sulfur booms during a supervolcano eruption could kill millions of people in the surrounding area and potentially endangering all of humanity. Here's Bob with sports. Oh, my Lord. That's your Food World Order headlines. Again, all those stories that we talk about on these episodes, I believe it was about 15 stories today, they will always be tweeted out about an hour before showtime. So if you're listening live, you can see the stories that we're going to talk about. And as I always say, for any and every day, the hashtag of the day is just pick a dozen or so stories. There are so many other stories that you can use to go find out. If food's your thing, hashtag Food World Order should be the one that you follow. Oh, that's right. What's the new Gerard Butler movie? It's about like geoengineering, isn't it? We'll have to talk about that on Friday. Friday is when we talk about the entertainment industrial complex. And I've got brand new music today from Josh Ritter. He's been around for a long time. His brand new song, Showboat, is fantastic. Feels nice and rainy for me up here in the Pacific Northwest. But first, of course, let's look at this day in history. September 20th, 1881. U.S. President Chester A. Arthur is sworn in the morning after becoming president upon James A. Garfield's death. That we reported for you yesterday in history. September 20th, 1893, Charles Duryea and his brother road test the first American-made gasoline-powered automobile. September 20th, 1946, the first Cannes Film Festival is held, having been delayed 7 years, due to that dang World War II. And on September 20th, 1963, an optimistic and upbeat President John Fitzgerald Kennedy suggests that the Soviet Union and the United States cooperate on a mission to mount an expedition to the moon. The proposal caught both the Soviets and many Americans off guard.
The global spotlight is on the UN's glass and concrete headquarters in New York. To this great diplomatic arena comes the President of the United States to deliver a major policy address. Accompanied by Ambassador Adlai Stevenson, he is welcomed by Secretary General U Thant and Dr. Ralph Bunche. The present pause in the Cold War is hailed by the U.S. Chief Executive, who states that East and West must continue to seek agreement on measures which prevent war. Then this dramatic proposal.
Finally, in a field where the United States and the Soviet Union have a special capacity, in the field of space, there is room for new cooperation, for further joint efforts in the regulation and exploration of space. I include among these possibilities a joint expedition to the moon. Space offers no problems of sovereignty. By resolution of this assembly, the members of the United Nations have forsworn any claim to territorial rights in outer space or on celestial bodies, and declared that international law and the United Nations Charter will apply. Why, therefore, should man's first flight to the moon be a matter of national competition? Why should the United States and the Soviet Union, in preparing for such expeditions, become involved in immense duplications of research, construction, and expenditure?
Crunch, and then it rips, just like those awesome newsreels often do. September 20th, 1963, Kennedy proposes a joint mission to the moon. Seeing it, that's again, past his prologue. What about the mining rights of things? September 20th, 1970, Jim Morrison found guilty in Miami, Florida of indecent exposure and profanity. He was acquitted, though, on charges of lewd and lascivious behavior. The charges were related to a performance by The Doors. September 20th, 1971, Peter Frampton quits Humble Pie to start a solo career. In 1971, that same day, having weakened after making landfall in Nicaragua the previous day, Hurricane Irene regains enough strength to be renamed Hurricane Olivia, making it the first known hurricane to cross from the Atlantic Ocean into the Pacific, on this day, September 20th, 1971. 72, on this day, the cops find weed growing on Paul and Linda McCartney's farm. Shocker. September 20th, 1973, two events. Jim Croce was killed on this day in a plane crash on his way to Sherman, Texas for a concert. Maury Muleson and 4 others were also killed in the helicopter. That same day, Billie Jean King beats Bobby Riggs in the Battle of the Sexes tennis match at the big ol' Houston Astrodome. Oh no, 3 events that day. The third event that day, September 20th, 1973, the Roxy opens in LA. The opening acts? Elton John, Carole King, and Jackson Browne. September 20th, 1975, the Bay City Rollers appeared live on the premiere of the Howard Cosell's Saturday Night Show on ABC TV. It was their U.S. debut. Speaking of debuts, a year later, September 20th, 1976, the Captain and Tennille Show premiered on ABC. September 20th, 1979, a coup d'etat in the Central African Empire overthrows Emperor Bokassa I the First. September 20th, 2000, the United Kingdom's MI6 Secret Intelligence Service building is attacked by individuals using a Russian-built RPG-22 anti-tank missile. The perpetrators remain unidentified. September 20th, 2001, in a joint address to the session of Congress and the American sheeple, U.S. President George Walker Bush declares a, quote, war on terror. 16 years ago today, and it is still raging on. Doesn't matter which puppet's in the White House, does it? And finally, September 20th, 2011, the United States military ends its don't ask, don't tell policy because by that point, after a decade of the war of terror, they need more meat for the war machine. So they don't care if you're gay or trans or illegal or a gangbanger or a felon, they just need you in there. Hooah! Actually saw an email not too long ago from someone that says, I just can't support your work because you don't love the cops and soldiers. Well, sorry. Published to Media Monarchy a decade ago today, September 20th, 2007, tasers and sensors and God, oh my, a 56-year-old wheelchair-bound woman dies after being tasered 10 times. So this part a decade ago, this was the point where they got real taser happy. It's like, why are you guys using the taser so much in all these people? And it, reached a pretty large outcry. So instead, what they decided to do is not use the tasers as much, and now they just shoot and kill people. Now are the situations where it's like, why aren't you tasing the shit out of people like you did back in the Audis? What kind of world might we be living in if Michael Brown was tased, or if Philando Castile was tased, or Eric Garner was tased, or hell, even Trayvon, or goddamn Zimmerman? Also published to Media Monarchy a decade ago today, Bin Laden tape to declare war on Musharraf. Osama bin Laden will release a new message soon declaring war on Pakistani President General Pervez Musharraf, Al-Qaeda had announced. And finally published to Media Monarchy a decade ago today, New York City rejects Ahmadinejad request to visit Ground Zero, or of course, as those old neocons, which, the new neocons that are all right back in the White House, they would say, why visit it here when we can bring Ground Zero to you? And those same discussions all back around. Different train, same names attached to it. Celebrating birthdays today, September 20th, Upton Sinclair, born on this day way back in 1878. It's also German-American political scientist, philosopher, and academic's birthday, Leo Strauss. You read about him when you look at those Trotskyite neocons that infest the corporate news machines. Red Auerbach, basketball player and coach, legendary, born on this day. Bobby Nunn from the Robins and the Coasters. It's also Sophia Loren's birthday. She was born on this day in 1934. It's also Tits and Dragons creator George R.R. Martin's birthday. Gary Cole, he's a longtime actor. You probably know him because he's going to need you to go ahead and come in on Saturday, okay? Nuno Betancourt, guitarist from Extreme. It's also Gunnar and Matthew Nelson's birthday. They can't live without your love and affection. Hey, guess what? It's also Patrick Pentland's birthday. He is guitar, stage right for Canada's Beatles, my favorite band, Sloan. He was born on this day in '69, and he shares his birthday with Australians Tim Rogers from the band UMI. It's also Ben Shepherd of Soundgarden's birthday, Asia Argento's birthday, and Philip Phillips, who I believe is rolling through town here again. Hey, speaking of music, why don't we wrap this episode up with brand new music from Josh Ritter from his brand new record, Gathering. It actually comes out this Friday. Josh Ritter, longtime independent folky guy, been kicking it for a long time. And those are the artists we like to highlight here on your Morning Monarchy, as we always wrap up with the song of the day. And that's a little way to wet your whistle to lead you into our daily DJ set at noon. You got your Morning Monarchy, your Pump Up the Volume. We will be taping the latest episode of New World next week a little bit later today. If you got some good stories, tweet those at us using hashtag New World Next Week, and your story might be included in one of the most popular underground news shows in the world. And that does it. That's the food, health, and environment news for you. Hashtag Food World Order. That's your Morning Monarchy for Wednesday, September 20th, 2017. As we go out with music by Josh Ritter, I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Again, thanking you so much for taking part and listening, and reminding you, as always, don't hate the media, become the media. Take care.
Every time it rains, it pours. I pray it rains just a little more on me. 'Cause I'm the guy who never cries, and I gotta keep my reputation clean. And here's a helpful tip to rain, administered in raindrops may help to hide the tears a little more. Which is why a guy who never cries looks up at the sky with hopeful eyes, hoping when it finally rains it pours. I'm just a showboat, won't catch me crying, no, won't catch me showing any hurt. I'm just a showboat, pretending I can stay afloat, pretending I'm not sinking over her. Every time the sun goes down, I pray the sunlight takes the sound as well. 'Cause I'm the guy who never cries, and I gotta keep the pain all to myself. No light to see me shaking, no sound to hear me breaking, no sound to hear the teardrops hit the floor. Which is why a guy who never cries stays up all night with hopeful eyes, hoping when it finally rains it pours. I'm just a showboat, won't catch me crying, no, won't catch me showing any hurt. I'm just a showboat, pretending I can stay afloat, pretending I'm not sinking over her. Time I think of her, I wonder if she ever thinks of me. Out all night and running wild, the latest style's the greatest company. With laughter, lights and drinking, trying hard to keep from thinking, and seeking for what he is searching for. Which is why I might be. Only guy who never cries is never lonesome all the time. See him dancing up on tables, Shauna's leases at those Maples, though he looks a little tired. One eye always pointed skyward, waiting for a drop of rain to fall and help to hide the pain, to fall and help to lift the boat, so he can think he's still afloat, pretending he ain't sinking low, pretending he ain't sinking over, pretending he ain't sinking over.
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato. Since 2005, Media Monarchy has covered the real news about politics, health, technology and the occult, all remixed with music and media that matters. Go to MediaMonarchy.com/support and become a monthly subscriber so you can help keep independent, non-commercial, alternative media going and growing. Thanks.